Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up and my January TBR, my first TBR of 2025. Woo! If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I have been really sick the past week. We're going on 7-8 days now. I'm almost better, but I'm not completely better yet. So I still have a lot of congestion in my sinuses, which is a huge pain in the butt. I still have a little bit of cough, a little bit of sore throat going on, but my eyes are definitely a lot better than my last video, and this is the first time I've put on makeup in 2 weeks. So I'm really trying to get back into my routine so that I can start the new year off on a great start. So yeah, let's talk about December though. December was a crazy month. I started off the month with 3 books that were left over from November. I did finish all of those books within the first week of December, so that's good. So I finished a total of 8 books altogether in December. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I technically did use January 1st as my last day of reading. I'm using the excuse that I was really sick, so I needed that extra day just to finish up all of my books, but 8 books together in December. And considering how busy December was, I think that's pretty good because the holidays were busy. Work was busy. That's probably why I got sick, is because I was so busy. But you know what? It all turned out okay. Not only were the holidays great, I got to spend it with my family, but I've also been hinting at something over on Bookstagram if you've been paying attention. So I'm really excited to share the news that I actually got a promotion at my job, at my place of work, which is something that I have wanted for so long. I can't even tell you. If anyone is ever interested in hearing my journey through corporate America, let me know. Obviously, that's not book related, but I'd be happy to share like tips and tricks, and if anyone actually wants to hear about it. If not, that's okay. But yeah, it's something I wanted for a long time, so I am super happy. I'm starting off the year in a new role, in a promotion. So yeah, getting there was a lot of work and I was super busy, but yet still somehow managed to read all of these books. So like I said, I finished 8 books in December and I liked all of them. There is not one book that I read in December that I did not like. I absolutely liked all of them. So whenever I like all the books I read, obviously that makes them really difficult to rank. But I did my best, so let's jump in with my 8th favorite book of December. And that is going to be Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This is the 3rd Fredrik Backman book that I've read, and this is the first time a Fredrik Backman book has not, made it to the top. A Man Called Ove, absolutely loved. Britt Marie was here, absolutely loved. But I feel like both of those books had a very positive, heartwarming message, and this book does not. Oh my god, this book does not. This book is super depressing, and honestly, I wish I had known that before I started reading it, because I don't think I would have read this for the holidays if I had known that. So this book is about a very small town, a very small isolated town that is really invested in their youth hockey league. And their hockey league is about to win big, make it to the big times. They're about to succeed in a really big way. But then this tragedy happens, and I don't want to give it away, but let me just say, spoiler warning big time for this book. If you are triggered at all by anything, I encourage you to look up what this book is about before reading it, because I did not. And I wasn't triggered because I don't get triggered by that type of stuff, but I was very surprised. There is a thing that happens about halfway, maybe a third of the way through the book, that completely tears this town apart. That makes everyone like pick a side, basically, us versus them, that mentality. And this book really like dives deep into the kids that play hockey, the parents, the coaches, and like what really happens to this town when tragedy strikes. And on one hand, it's very well written. It's a very well written book, and it's very, I think, meaningful and deep. But oh man, I was not expecting such a heartbreaking story over the holidays. So yeah, I don't think I would have chosen to read this over Christmas if I knew what it was about. But it's still a really good book, and it's really well written. It's just like, can you mentally handle this sort of depressing book? So again, I still enjoyed it, but that's what I would say. My 7th favorite book of December is going to be A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Lynn. This is a YA fantasy, and I really enjoyed this one. It's about a young girl who goes to the palace to enter this contest where they use tea as a form of magic. So like right off the bat, I was really drawn into this world. It's all based on Chinese culture and Chinese mythology. So I really loved the tea ceremonies and the way that the author describes, you know, how you pour the tea and what it all means to their culture. And I thought that was really beautiful. But being in the royal palace, our main character gets pulled into all these, you know, royal politics and alliances and backstabbing, and I really like all that sort of stuff. So it's hard for me to explain why this book is so low, because on the surface, this book has absolutely everything that I love. And again, like I said, I did enjoy this book. I did enjoy it. There's just something about the main character, I feel like, that prevents it from being like over the top. And to me, I feel like as great as the story is and as great as the world building is, I feel like the main character is very much a generic YA fantasy female. And if you read a lot of YA fantasy, hopefully you know what I mean by that. But I feel like a lot of YA, you know, young girl characters are very similar. It's like they come from a poor house or a poor background, but like they rise above it. And I don't know, I just feel like this character is one I've read a million times before. I like this type of character. I like this type of story. Like, it definitely speaks to me. But at this age, you know, I'm over 40 years old now, like, for something to like really impress me, I want something more. So I really like this story. Again, the world building, I think in particular, is really well done. It was really beautiful. Like, as beautiful as this cover is, that is how beautiful the story is. So I did like it. I just wanted a little bit more, but again, still liked it. My next favorite book of December is going to be The Longest Autumn by Amy Avery. And here's a book I feel like that did something a little bit different, and that's why it's higher. So our main character in this story is an acolyte of the god of autumn. So there's 4 gods, each of the seasons, and they have these acolytes that like help the gods, help them usher in the new season. yada, yada, yada. And there is this magic mirror for Autumn, and all of Autumn's acolytes. He has, like, you know, the head acolyte, which is our main character. They walk through the mirror and they help the god through, and they help him bring in the season. But this year, this cycle, the mirror breaks mysteriously, and it's this huge deal because it means that Autumn cannot return to his realm, so the world is in this perpetual state of autumn. There's no winter, no spring, no summer, like there's no cycle, so everyone's just stuck in autumn, and it's a really bad thing to happen. Like, on the surface, you feel like, oh, autumn, perpetual autumn, that's great, but it's really not, because if nothing dies, that means that nothing can grow. So our character is kind of like kicked out of her position, and then she's trying to find out, like, what happened, who broke this mirror, who caused this to happen, yada, yada, yada. And the reason I like this story a little bit more than A Magic Steeped in Poison is I really like the romance in this one, which is an odd thing for me to say, because I usually find the romance in fantasy stories to be very predictable. But in this one, there's multiple romances that are going on, and I find a lot of them, they're very deep, they're very nuanced, they're very complex, and I would say slightly steamy, like not compared to Sarah J. Maas or Jennifer Armentrout, like not that level of steam, but there's a teeny bit in here. So I found this story really interesting. I guess that's the main thing I would say. It's just interesting. It's an interesting story. There are interesting characters. There are interesting dynamics between all of them. So yeah, I found this a pretty enjoyable read. My fifth favorite book of December is going to be The Nomad's Crucible by Charles McGarry, aka Bookish Chaz. So before I talk about this one, yes, I might be a little bit biased because I did beta read this book. But this is my first time reading the finished, complete version, and it was such a treat to read. It was such a joy to read. I think the thing that I love so much about reading indie books is because I really feel like I know the author and where the author is coming from. So in this story, our main character, his name is Tread, and he's basically like an assassin for hire. So people hire him to like go out and assassinate people. So he gets this job to go assassinate this ruler. But when he gets there, he finds out that there's more going on than meets the eye. And I love Tread so much. I love his character so much because there's a couple scenes in particular where Tread is described as having this like hat that he wears with a like, you know when you're wearing a hat and you have a little like rope so it stays on your head? I just found that so funny because I know Chaz loves hats. If you're a fan of Chaz and you've seen his channel, you'll know that Chaz loves hats. So having that little detail where his character has this hat, it's like I can so easily picture it in my head because I know how much Chaz loves hats. And I love little details like that. I feel like that really helps me personally connect with the characters in the story. So if you don't know Chaz, you may not pick up on that, but that's okay. If you're a fan of classic fantasy, high fantasy, these big adventures, I think you'll really like this one because there's a lot going on here. So not only do we have Tread, our assassin, but the ruler that he's hired to assassinate has this whole family, and the ruler has a daughter who is a super cool character. There's a little bit of Lord of the Rings in here, a little bit of Dune. I feel like it's a cross of fantasy and sci-fi, which is really, really cool. So if you're into that at all, I definitely recommend The Nomad's Crucible. So now we're getting into the top 4, and I really struggled with how to order these ones, but My fourth favorite book of December is going to be The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. This book ended up being a big surprise for me because this is a cozy fantasy, and I've had some trouble with cozy fantasy. I have found cozy fantasy to be a genre that I'm not really into because they're too cute and they're too simple and they're too sweet, and I like my stories a little bit darker. However, I did find myself actually liking this one. I don't like everything about it, so that's why it's not higher up, but there is enough that I like about it to deserve this spot. And the number one thing I like about it the most is all of the magic creatures. So there are mer horses, which are a cross between mermaids and horses. There are these flying cats in the town. Our main character has a magic cactus and a magic plant that are sentient. I mean, how cool is that? So basically, our main character, her name is Keela, and she is a librarian in like the capital city. But there's a revolution going on, and the city is being like burned down. So she grabs a bunch of spell books and she flees the city with her sentient plants and ends up on this little tiny island that her parents came from. And while she's on the island, all she wants to do is just kind of hide there with her books, hope that, no one notices her, and just kind of live a quiet life. But as she gets to meet the people of the town, she decides to open up a jam shop. She sells jam, and she ends up getting pulled into all these, different things where she has to use her books to help the town people. On the surface, again, it is a very cute story. If you are into cozy fantasy at all, highly, highly, highly recommend. I'm not into cozy fantasy, so there are a couple things that I did question, and if anyone wants me to do a deep dive on this one, definitely let me know in the comments because I will. But I love the world building in this one. I loved the plot. I felt like it actually had high stakes, which some cozy fantasy doesn't. So I love that it had high stakes. I loved all of the unique animals, the sentient plants, the flying cats, the mer horses, the bird that has apple blossoms as its tail. There are so many good things in here. Our main character is the only thing that I kind of had an issue with, but again, happy to talk more about this one. Otherwise, it was way cuter than I thought it was going to be. I liked it way more than I thought. So just for the surprise factor alone, that's why it's higher on my list. My third favorite book of December is going to be The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. This is the first book in his Night Angel trilogy, and I have had this book for a really long time. I picked it up at a, used book sale. I've been waiting to read it, and oh my god, I'm so glad I finally did, because this book really made me feel nostalgic. It brought me back to my early days of reading fantasy with The Wheel of Time and Sword of Truth. I feel like this is a classic epic fantasy, and I just really loved that. So we have our main character, this young boy named Azoth, and he is like a street rat, basically. He's a thief, yada yada yada, but he ends up meeting this famous assassin, Durzo Blint, and he wants to train under him, but Durzo is I'm not gonna train you, you're just some nobody's filth. Why would I waste my time on you? But of course he ends up getting trained, and he gets pulled into all of this stuff because the kingdom where he lives is under strife. There's who's gonna be the next king? No one knows. They also might be invaded, so there's a lot going on. And as Azoth starts to train, he gets introduced to this wider world, and I just love that. Again, everything I love about fantasy, about epic fantasy, about classic fantasy. It's all in here, and there are so many great twists and turns with the plot. I was so surprised and pleasantly surprised at how good of a job Brent did, like, with the actual plot. Like, as soon as you think you know what's going on, he would throw something in there and you're like, holy crap, oh my god. So many great twists and turns. I absolutely love this one, and I'm so glad that I finally read it. So that brings me to my top two, and again, I kept on going back and forth with these two, but my second favorite book of December is going to be The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is my first Holly Black book. It's definitely not going to be my last because, oh my god, this book was such a pleasant delight. I went into this one with medium expectations. I'm like, I knew it was a YA fantasy, so I was expecting it to have a lot of the YA fantasy tropes, but this book surprised me, and that's like really hard to do. It is definitely darker than I thought, which I always appreciate. So we have a young girl who has a fairy father and a human mother. And she is basically like kidnapped at a young age, her and her sister, by her fairy father, who's like, I'm going to steal you and bring you back to fairy. So at a young age, she was brought into this fairyland, into this fairy court, and she's kind of struggled ever since because as a mortal, she doesn't really fit in with the other fairies. So she's kind of made it her mission to like be this fairy knight, and I'm going to be this champion so I can prove myself, prove that I belong here in the fairy realm, which I thought was really interesting on the surface because I'm like, it could have gone the other direction, right? Like, why doesn't she want to get back to the mortal world? Why doesn't she like despise the fairies for basically like taking her from her life? But she doesn't. She wants to be one of them. Not only does she want to be one of them, she wants to be like the best of them. So she kind of gets dragged into this, again, political game with the fairies. She gets dragged into all these like underground kind of things going on, and this book took a lot of twists and turns that I was not expecting. Not only that, but our main character actually kills someone, which again, I did not expect this book to get that dark, but it did, and I love that. I love it when a book is unexpectedly dark, especially a YA fantasy, because I feel like those tend to be more like light-hearted and fluffy, and this book is not. So it's super fun. It's not like super dark, but it's just darker than I was expecting. So yeah, I cannot wait to see where this series goes. And yeah, Holly Black, I'm definitely intrigued. And finally, that brings me to my favorite book of December, Warcross by Marie Lu. For those of you who don't remember, this book was actually sent to me by one of you, by Seajar. Seajar, thank you again so much for sending me this book. It ended up being my favorite book of December. So we have a young girl, Amika, and she is living on her own in New York City. She's a hacker, but she is like struggling. She's on her last leg. Like, she's about to get evicted. She has no money. She has no parents. She has no life. But then she accidentally like hacks herself into Warcross, which is this like super phenomenal online game. Think like Warcraft, basically. It's a game that everyone plays online. There are huge contests every year. And because she like accidentally hacks into this game, the head of the company that owns Warcross is like, hey, I want you to come work for me because there is another hacker out there who's trying to mess things up for me, so I want you to catch them. So what follows is this cat and mouse game between Amika and the other hacker. His name is Zero. She gets to play in these like exclusive video games. And yeah, this book is just so much fun. So much fun. I think it's classified as a middle grade book, but I would consider it way more YA, if not adult. Even though the characters are young, I feel like there are just so many like mature themes that happen in here. But yeah, this book is so much fun. If you like the internet, I mean, who doesn't? If you like online gaming, if you like video games, if you like any of that stuff, I feel like you'll enjoy Warcross. Oh my god, this book was just so much fun. Again, not only are the characters fun, but the mystery is fun. Like, who is this other hacker? What do they want? There's a huge twist at the end that I did not see coming. And yeah, I did not know that this was a series, but it is. And I cannot wait to see where this series goes because, again, it was just so much fun. This book was a solid, fun, it was a page turner. I couldn't wait to see what happened next. So yeah, if you have not read Warcross, I highly recommend it. Okay, so those are all the books I finished in December. There is one book I started in December that I haven't finished, and that is Under the Dome by Stephen King. I'm about halfway through this one, so I hope to finish it throughout the rest of January, as well as these other books that I will quickly talk about right now. First up, I have a book that I've been wanting to read forever, and that is the 10,000 Doors of January by Alix E. Harrow. I read my first Alix E. Harrow book earlier this year, Starling House, which ended up being one of my absolute favorite, so I have really high hopes for this one. Even though this was like her debut novel, her first book, I've heard some good things. It's supposed to be a portal fantasy, so we'll see how that goes. I already mentioned Stephen King, so my adult fantasy is going to be Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies was one of my favorite books of last year, so again, I have really high hopes for the sequel, and I know there's a third book coming out, so I needed to read this before the third book came out, so it seemed like a perfect opportunity to do so. For my rando pick of the month, I have Ready Player One by, what's his name? Cline, by Ernest Cline. I've been wanting to read this book for a while, so again, yeah, I've been wanting to read it for a while, so I needed a rando book, and I've been wanting to read more sci-fi, so it seemed like a good choice. For my YA fantasy, I am really excited to be reading A Whole New World by Liz Braswell. I've been seeing people read these Disney books for forever now, and I've really been wanting to dive in. And I believe this is one of the earlier ones, either, first published or maybe first in the series. I know there's like no particular order to read these books in, but I tried to find like one of the first published ones, which I believe is this one. So, and I've always been a big fan of Aladdin, so hopefully this does not disappoint. And finally, I have my book box book pick, and that's going to be The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. I've heard a lot about this book. It's supposed to be a romantasy and involve vampires, and I kind of have mixed feelings on romantasy, but again, I have heard good things about this one, so I'm going to dive in and see how it goes. So that is it for me today, and Lola. So now we want to know from you, what was your favorite book in December? What are you going to be reading in January? Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more furry friends coming your way soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.